When you talk to me, you're talking to somebody who made $1 billion and lost $1 billion.
Yeah.
And then and then do you have the courage and the will to fight on and be successful going forward? That's what it comes down to.
You're listening to Going Deep with Aaron Watson.
Get down.
You're going deep.
Glen, thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
My pleasure for being here, Aaron.
I am super excited. There's so much of your career with all sorts of different twists and turns that we have to unpack. I even did a little bit of snooping, talking to some past employees and team members at FreeMarkets.
Really?
That we're going to bring some questions up later on. But to start things off, we're in the Forever.com office.
Yes.
That is your current entrepreneurial endeavor. I'm sure there's probably others, ones that you're marinating on the side. But just to start things off, the concept is to help families store their media in all sorts of different forms in perpetuity. So
right.
Take us through.
Yeah, the problem is people right now lack privacy.
Yeah.
And they also lack permanence and completeness. So I won't mention any competitors in the podcast, but there's a lot of photo sites where you can upload photos and then print out books or cards or whatever. But most of those sites have the business model where if you stop printing, they'll give you 12 months, 18 months, maybe even 24 months. But then if you stop printing, they'll delete all your stuff. And of course, everybody gets old someday. So by definition, everyone is going to stop printing.
Yeah.
Which means all of their stuff will be deleted.
Yeah.
Same thing. There's other competitors who, in the pure cloud. So that's in the photo printing space. Then there's pure cloud storage players, and their model is pay us money every month, and if you stop paying, and I just one of the best known ones. I had this experience myself recently where I had an account for a while. I used it for a while for some business stuff, and then I stopped using it, and it wasn't important to me because I had a forever account and everything else. And what happened was, well, they kept 12 months went by. I didn't pay. And then they kept sending me an email. Hey, pay us or we're going to delete you. Pay us, we're going to delete. And finally, after about 6 more months of that, they deleted me. And so, again, and everybody's going to get old. Everybody's going to get to a point where they're not paying that every month. And so by definition, everything will be deleted. And so, or think about, there's other competitors of ours who convert digital media. And big deal, you take an old DVD or an old VHS tape or an old 16 millimeter piece of film reel from the 1920s, say if your great-grandparents had that in the family, or an 8 millimeter from when your parents were, kids, and you send that in and get it digitized and it comes back to you on a thumb drive.
Yeah.
Great. But where do you, and you put that on your PC. But the problem is every PC and every Mac is going to crash eventually. They're all, so nothing, it's permanent. And so that was my, I'm a family memory. And I've been married for 30 years. I have 5 children. I've got, my father has passed away, but my mother's alive. I have, in-laws. We've done some family history research. We have a lot of this content, and it's important content. The story of our family and the story of what we've learned is important. And where does that live long term? It doesn't live on a photo print site where it's going to get deleted if you stop printing. It doesn't live on a typical, cloud storage site where if you stop paying every month, it goes away. A family needs to have a permanent digital home for that stuff.
Yeah.
So that was the core of the idea for Forever.com. I realized, where do I keep my stuff long term? Even if there's some really cool sites. I'll mention Ancestry. Ancestry is a very cool site to do research. But when you've done all that research and pulled all that information together, where do you keep it long term? And social media. So how do you keep stuff on Facebook or Instagram? It's very, very transactional. It's great to share today and be in touch with people today, tomorrow. But then even pictures you saw a month ago, it's very hard to even search and even find them.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll be saved somewhere, but will your child be able to find it? I don't think so. So again, whether it's social media, whether it's photo printing, whether it's cloud storage or digital conversion, none of these services are built for the long term. So what we did with Forever was we said what the world needs, families need, and not businesses, because businesses want to destroy stuff after a few years. They don't want to keep files long, right? So hey, if you're a business, Google Drive or I'll mention some names, right? Google Drive, Dropbox is fine because you don't really care long term. But if you're a family, you want stuff to last long term. So where do you go to keep your digital memories permanently? And oh, by the way, if I'm going to keep them all, if I'm going to put all the family photos in one place and all the family video, not just the stuff I'm converting from the past, but all the stuff off my phone today, if I'm going to keep that all in one place, I got to be able to print my photo card, my holiday cards from there. And if I want to do a photo book honoring my my mother at her birthday, I've got to be able to, or if I want to do a photo book for my wife's birthday or whatever, or for Valentine's Day, or I want to be able to stream all my video and see it on my phone. I need to be able to do all, or I want to create a really cool slideshow that I can look on my phone, or I could project it at a family event. I need to be able to do all that. If I'm going to keep everything in one place, I need to be able to do all that memory keeping in one place. So that's Forever, forever.com. A friend of mine, I was describing this to them. He described it as, so it's like my private cloud forever. It's like, yeah, that's right. It's your private cloud forever. It's the place, your private place. And nobody's data mining. There's no advertising.
Yeah.
So it's not like YouTube or Facebook or something where every single time, or even Gmail, every single time I put any content at all online, they know all about me.
Yeah. Just because you have pictures with the dog, they're not going to start selling you dog collars and food.
Exactly. So people need permanence. They also need some privacy. And so that's what forever.com is. It's your private, personal, permanent place in the cloud to do all your family memory keeping. And there's all succession settings. So, I can say that I've got some private content I really don't want to share during my lifetime, but the day after I die, I want my family to be able to see that. Or maybe 10 years after I die, or maybe 50 years after I die.
Wow.
I can set things to be shared that way because it's endowed for life. When I buy Forever Storage, whether I buy on a monthly payment plan or whether I buy with an upfront payment, I'm buying a certain number of gigabytes forever. And so the model is, and it costs much more than it would just for that month. The monthly payment for 10 gigs would be very, very tiny. Well, it's not that much at Forever either, but it's more. It's for list price for 10 gigabytes. Forever is $199. And most of that money is going to the Forever Guarantee Fund, which is like a long-term, it's like a university endowment for my photos.
Wow.
So I'm endowing my future by putting this money with Forever, and that money's going to a pool, just like a university endowment or like a life insurance reserve fund. And it's a pool of money that's invested to generate capital gains and dividends and interest, and with a small distribution every year to pay for that year's cloud storage. And so based on those economics, we guarantee when you join Forever, you buy a Forever storage account, you buy your first 10 gigs or 100 gigs or whatever it is, that money you're putting money in the Forever Guarantee Fund, and we're guaranteeing that we will keep your stuff private. We will be the guarantor. We will be the guardian of your digital property, your digital life for your lifetime plus 100 years guaranteed. And I would guarantee longer than 100 years because the business model is designed to be in perpetuity.
Yeah.
But our lawyers said, more than 100 years is kind of...
Lawyers, they'll tend to do that.
But we basically say, we guarantee your lifetime plus 100 years with a goal of many, many, many generations beyond.
So what's so interesting in hearing this...
And that is Forever. Let me get that. And that is forever.com. And everybody listening to this should go check it out at forever.com.
Right on. So what's so interesting about this idea is it ties into another concept that we've, both is actually part of the founding principle of the company, Piper, but also something we've explored in different stuff that we've made, which is this notion of a family lineage that used to be the thing for kings and queens, and they'd have the castle and the books and the records of everything. But in this modern age where there's, media making tools and technologies that are available to more or less everybody,
right?
The capacity for you to build that family lineage here, now, today, relative to any other time in history is completely unparalleled. But the storage aspect of that definitely goes by the wayside.
And how do you, where do you keep it and how do you interact with it? How do you keep your own digital property? How do you share effectively? With Forever, there's all kinds of social tools to share. You can have all your family members have Forever accounts and you can share. You can send links and let people see even outside Forever family to see, different content. So yeah, it's a solution we're doing, and it's not, we're not perfect. We've been at it for 7 years, but we're not perfect. But every month we just bang away. We make it better and better and better. And we listen to our clients. We have tens of thousands of paying clients. And so we're a real business, and we listen and we improve all the time. And yeah, it's exactly what you're saying. We're letting people use, basically we're filling this massive hole, which is, yeah, the tools are out there to create all this content, but how does it live long term, and how do I safeguard it? Well, we're the solution to that. And of course, I was able to buy the domain forever.com.
That helps.
And it's like the perfect name for what we do.
Yeah. So when we talk about these other companies, and I'm not asking you to bash them too much of a degree, but in terms of just pure analysis, your acknowledgement of the endowment and the incentives kind of baked into building something that way aligns your incentives with your customer. And often
Correct.
the issue isn't necessarily that there's like an explicit nefarious or malicious intent by the business. It's just they've been built in a way that their incentives are misaligned with that goal.
Oh, absolutely. These are awesome businesses. But it's just, if you are Google and it's awesome that they provide this free email service, Gmail, to everybody in the world. But there's a trade-off, right? One of the founding principles of the United States of America is the oldest regime in the world, oldest continuously. We've lived under one constitution for over 230 years. That's older than any. So we're a new country relative, compared to other countries ethnically, because we're not really a single ethnic country, but we've lived under the same legal structure, the same constitution longer by far than any other country. We're by far the most successful country in the history of humanity. And one of the founding principles of that democracy under the rule of law was private mail. The U.S. Postal Service goes right back to the U.S. Army was founded in 1775, a year before the Declaration of Independence. The U.S. Postal Service, I don't know the exact date, I think it was pretty soon thereafter, maybe 1777, I forget exactly. But having private mail was a cornerstone of private speech, of First Amendment, private speech, free speech rights. And that was sacrosanct. Even when I was growing up, so I was born in 1964, I'm about to turn 56. When I was growing up in the 70s as a precocious, school student and stuff, the notion of the private mail was this sacrosanct, holy thing. Not wholly in a religious way, but in terms of our democracy and in terms of pride in America. And people forget that. It's because we don't even think about private mail anymore, because Gmail is not private.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think it is. But then, they get advertising about their dog because they've been sending emails to their mom about their dog.
Yeah.
And so it's this concept. So, but Google's great. Google's amazing. Amazon's great. All these companies are great companies, but they have business models that are, Facebook. I think Zuckerberg is terrific. I think he's an incredible entrepreneur, and I think Facebook is just an amazing machine. But it's based on the fact that they're gonna data mine everything about you, and that's why it's free. It's not free. You just don't pay because they data mine everything about you, and then they sell access to you. Right. That's their business model. And, it's funny, the congressional, all this sort of noise about Facebook in the last 2 years, it's really not fair to Mark Zuckerberg, because he's been very open about that for the entire history of the company. It's just, it's a sophisticated business model. Most people most normal people who use Facebook don't really understand it. They can't really explain why it's free. But they sort of know that they're being data mined all the time, that they don't really have privacy, but they don't, they're kind of okay with it. But when they really think about it, and when they also realize that, when I upload to Facebook asserts, they don't assert ownership of the photo back to the camera or back to the phone, but they assert a worldwide non-exclusive right to use that photo in any way they can, including deleting it.
Yeah.
So they once you upload to them, they own that, and they can use it in any way they want. They can data mine it, they can resell it, they can use it, and they can delete it whenever they want. So again, it's a great company that does amazing things. It's an amazing free connect the world social media thing. It's fabulous, but it's not the place to keep your key family memories that you want to keep forever. It's just not the place to keep them. Forever.com is the only, and it's interesting too. I kid that I'm old enough to actually worry about this.
Yeah.
Right. I had this idea in my late 40s I started the company, I guess, when I was 49. And people in their 20s, they think they're going to live forever. They don't realize, they just don't even think about these long-term issues. And so that's what I tell my investors and stuff. I'm young enough to be dangerous. I'm going to be at this for a long time. I'm also old, but I'm old enough to commit to it long-term.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of your listeners on this podcast are people younger in their career trying to figure out where they're going to go. One nice thing about being my age is that I've been through so many different phases in my career, and I've experienced so many things. I've eliminated some possibilities. You know, it's no secret. I used to be interested in politics. I thought maybe I would go into politics. Well, my wife and I have eliminated that as a possibility. We've decided not to do that.
Yeah.
Having decided not to do something, I'm never going to work for anybody else again. I don't need to. I'm not going to go to work for some large company, you know, in some role. So because I've eliminated a lot of things, I can commit to something long term. And so one of the things that's unique about what I've done that no manager at Google could ever do, no manager at Facebook could ever do, frankly, below Zuckerberg, is I've committed to my clients, I will do this for like the next 20 years at least. I don't want to retire. I want to be active for a long, long time. I'm going to lead this company as CEO for at least the next 20 years. And my role, my career, my mission is to make sure that we build forever into an institution, a business institution that can fulfill this guarantee, that will be able to be there for generations to come and not let down. There's no freaking way my team and I are going to let down our clients.
Yeah.
And we don't call them customers, we call them clients, because we have a long-term relationship with the people who've decided to trust forever.
That's beautiful. The energy that you've brought is no joke. We talked about Henry Thorne earlier in the conversation. Something that I deeply aspire to is to be able to bring an equivalent amount of vigor and enthusiasm to my work throughout the entirety of the career. That's a huge thing that we try to explore here. And I want to talk later on in the interview a little bit about, upon having the means, the choice to then continue into starting the other company. But I want to take us back to the beginning. That's cool with you. I'm sure that there's other, starting points that will feel more appropriate to you. But there's a lawn care business. There was a tour of duty in the Gulf War and the Harvard Business School, all as kind of the foundation setting of sorts. As I looked at your career and your arc here, I want to start with that tour of duty in the Gulf War and some of the disciplines that you took away from that experience and then applied as you were building yourself up.
Well, let me go back a little bit further, because you mentioned lawn care. So I grew up suburban kid from, kind of middle class suburban kid from the New York area, and I worked really hard as a kid. I don't know. I haven't been bored a day in my life since I was 12. I always had more stuff to do.
Yeah.
And that was around the time when my summer business was cutting lawns. And I did that for like 4 summers in between everything else I was doing. And I learned a lot about client service and, good clients, bad clients, and everything back then. So that was my first business.
And quick aside, this is more just like for my own mental note. I have a good friend who had a lawn care business from like 15, 14 years old. And like whatever he does next, I'm in on. Like I don't even know what it's going to be. I've just seen him do that. I know that I'm in on whatever he does next.
It's a great place to start. So I went to public high school, and my first really big achievement in life was I got into Harvard. It's funny. My parents were highly educated, but my dad almost challenged me that, because he really wanted me to go to another school, but he said, well, if you could get into Harvard, then I'd let you go there. So I got into Harvard, so I went. And then, but I went to Harvard, and I almost thought about going to the one of the military academies. I kind of had this desire to lead and get that experience of leading people in the military. I always had that kind of gut, this feeling in my gut that I'd like to try that out. So but I went to Harvard, didn't do it. I went to Harvard. Then I was at Harvard for 2 years. And it was in the spring of my sophomore year that I said, I knew a couple people who were doing the officer training programs. And I said, I'd really like to do that. So I went over to MIT because they had all the military training for the Army and the Marine Corps, et cetera. And I decided to sign up for the Army. And I went to a boot camp the summer after my sophomore year. And I did very well. I won a scholarship for my last 2 years in college. And I did all the leadership training, et cetera. And then when I graduated college, I got a commission, and I had been assigned to be in reserve duty. And that meant I had to be on it, in the reserves for 8 years total, with 6 months of active duty right after college to do more training I was a combat engineer officer. So that was the background. I kind of had this gut. I always wanted to try the military out. Wasn't sure I wanted to make it a career. This is what's relevant to your audience too, and this is a really important principle, is a lot of, I think that the young people I know who get frozen and get kind of confused about where to go next are people who aren't throwing themselves in doing stuff. It's like when you're 20 years old or 22 or even 56, like me, I'm 56 in 2 weeks, you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
It's unbounded, right? I mean, the people in our society who have like a more programmed future are like doctors. If you're sort of on the track to be a doctor, there's this whole prescribed path and everything. For the rest of us, or maybe even law, but even then it's pretty open-ended. For the rest of us, though, it's completely open-ended. So how do you manage that problem? You say, well, what do I like? What do I think I like? You throw yourself into it.
Yeah.
Gee, maybe I want to be a military officer. Well, go to a boot camp, throw yourself into it. See if you can try it out. That was what the officer training program I went into was, this great way to try it out. So anyway, I go do it. I get a commission. I did that for 6 months full-time after college. And then right before I left for the Army, I did a bunch of interviewing. I got a job in business it was Kraft General Foods, which actually became part of Kraft Heinz, right? So it was that company. And I did 6 months in the Army doing all kinds of leadership training and officer training. Then I worked for Kraft General Foods in marketing, doing consumer marketing. And then in the middle of that, I met my wife. We got married and we went back to Harvard Business School. I got into Harvard Business School. And then in the middle of Harvard Business School, remember all this time I'm, doing Kraft General Foods, I'm meeting my wife, blah, 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 blah. I'm still doing on the weekends, I'm doing all this reserve training. And, at one point I flew out to, we deployed to the desert, Mojave Desert out in California for 3 weeks of desert warfare training and blah, blah, all this stuff. And then I went back to Harvard Business School, did that for a year, got a job with McKinsey in the summer as a consultant in the summer between years because, basically I wasn't real happy with Kraft General Foods. Not aggressive enough for me. Too flat. I mean, I went.
You wanted pace.
I wanted pace and I wanted growth.
Yeah.
Right. I was working on these food products like Cool Whip and Jell-O, which were great old brands. Some entrepreneurs way long ago had created that and created a lot of value, but now it was maintenance.
Yep.
And it was like, if we did a crummy job, we would grow 1% a year. If we did an incredible job, we would grow 3% a year. Who cares, right? I mean, who cares if a few thousand more people eat Cool Whip?
Yeah.
It's probably hurting their heart, right? I mean, but let's assume it's good for. Who
it's not
cares?
Good for the photos. That's the year that I had
right.
a lot of Cool Whip.
Right, but it doesn't matter, and it just doesn't. And I learned from that though. So I threw myself into consumer marketing. I liked business, but I didn't like flat growth. I didn't like a sleepy organization, and I didn't like things that didn't grow, and I didn't like things that didn't matter. I was like, okay, but in the meantime, on the weekends, I'm doing the military, and the military has its good and bad too, but it mattered to me. Defending that country I talked about, that's over 230 years old, since our Constitution was first founded, 240 since the Declaration of Independence, whatever. That mattered to me. Defending, helping, being my little, as a member of the military, you're one little tiny piece, but that felt meaningful to me. So that was one thing I learned early on too. Throwing myself in, I learned. Okay, then I realized I don't want to be a career military officer. But what did I learn? Getting back to your question, I learned a lot about leadership. Now I'm gifted. I mean, I was born a leader. I've always had the ability to lead, and I've always had the ability to persuade. And so I've always been kind of a leader and a salesman.
Yeah.
And I just had that. I mean, when I was 4 years old, we'd, pull up to a gas station and this is the old days before Google Maps or anything. My dad would be like, hey, Glenn, go ask the guy for a map or whatever it was. And, little 5-year-old Glenn, I'd go in and talk to the man and get whatever needed to be gotten, right? Well, my dad was pumping the gas because he knew I could talk to people and I could do that. But in the military, I learned so much. So the first key leadership lesson I learned in the military, which really, I learned this the first time at the boot camp I went to when I was 20, was that great leaders are also great followers. They taught us that. They said, to be a great leader, you got to be a great follower. I remember hearing that. I was like, no way. I'm a leader. I'm not a follower. But then I learned, okay, every leader is under some authority or should be.
Yeah.
Right? And if you respect that authority and show respect for it and show your subordinates that you respect it, then they'll trust you. If you act like you don't trust the leadership above you or whatever authority is above you, no one's going to trust you as a leader. And that was a key concept. So as an example, let's say you're president of the United States. You don't have a boss. Well, you have the Constitution. You have the rule of law. One thing I admire about George Washington, I mean, this is old stuff, but the founder of this country he had a profound respect for democracy, the will of the people, and the rule of law. And that's why he was the first person in U.S. in world history in like 2,000 years to give up power. He was a victorious general led a war effort.
They were asking him for a third term.
But even before, the victorious general of a war effort. And what did he do? He went back to, when the war was over, 1783, he goes back to, I think it was just January 1783, he goes back to Philadelphia, turns in his commission to Congress, the Congress that had refused to fund him, the Congress that had been so weak and incapable during the war. But he always stayed under their authority. The military always stayed under civilian authority during the Revolutionary War before the Constitution. Why? Because of Washington. And he turned back in his commission, and then he goes back home to Mount Vernon. And then several years later, he's like the only guy anybody would trust. He, kind of chairs the Constitutional Convention, then he's elected president, and then begrudgingly he stays and does a second term, and then he left. He said, "I'm not doing a third term," and he leaves office, right? But think about that. So he gave up power, and not only did he gave up power twice. He gave up power after he won the war, and then he gave up power after he'd been president for 8 years. And in the middle, people don't even know this. At the very end of the war, before he turned in his commission to Congress in 1783, I think it was. In the fall of 1782, he stopped a coup. That the Continental Congress, the officers were so angry they hadn't been paid by Congress that they wanted to march on Philadelphia. He stopped it. So, I mean, bottom line is, here was a guy, this is George Washington, the first president of the United States, this amazing guy, and he behaved like he was under authority. He had respect for the authority above him, whether it was Congress, whether it was democracy as a concept, or whether it was the Constitution, right? So it's just, I could give many, many examples.
Yeah.
And I could give examples today of leaders in very senior positions who don't act like they're under authority and I don't care. I'm not being left, right, or center or whatever, but it doesn't matter what their politics are. If they act like they're not under authority, if they act like they're not accountable, then how can we trust them? So that's true politically. In business, it's the same way. If your people think that you're not responsible to shareholders, they think you don't act like you're responsible to a board of directors. You don't act like you're responsible to and accountable to your clients, to your customers. Then how can your subordinates trust you?
Yeah.
If you act think about some of these men who behave in men and women, but a lot of men behaving, in the Me Too era, behaving inappropriately in the workplace. Well, if that's a person who's acting like they're not under authority, they're not accountable, right? And how can people trust them? They can't.
And the notion that in any way, shape, or form that could be compartmentalized. That happens over here, but like everything else is going smoothly and working.
Yeah,
devoid
Aaron,
of that one element.
I got to tell you, one thing I've learned. I'm a student. I love history. I love economics.
Clearly.
I love science. I love religion. I mean, I really am a student of the world. And one thing I have learned, it's true in business, it's true in the economy, it's true in general. Everything is tied together. This is on the mega scale. Now, no one's smart enough to understand it all. No one. A lot of people try. Just watch. I love to watch. I love it in the mornings. I run. I work out and run every morning, and I do it inside and I watch CNBC. I watch Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and I forget his name, the other guy, and I watch Maria Bartiromo. I flip back and forth, and And so there's a lot of people, there's pundits and stuff out there trying to figure out the economy and talk and blah, 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 blah. But no one is smart, no PhD, no one is smart enough to understand all the connections, but it's all connected. I mean, what happens in, Iraq affects what happens everywhere. I mean, it's all connected. And that's on a global basis. By the way, it's all connected across time too.
Yeah.
Gets back to forever.com. One piece of real ignorance out there is most people live right within their own moment in time, and they don't understand where we came from and where we're going. They don't understand all the connections. It's connected across geography. It's connected across countries and people, and it's connected across time. Everything affects everything else. And within your own life, that's on the mega scale. Within your own life, yeah, the idea of compartmentalization is complete bunk. Everything is connected. If you're not trustworthy in one part of your life, let me tell you, you're not trustworthy in the other part of your life.
Facts.
Yeah.
So trying to make sense of markets, trying to figure out what's going on.
Yep.
One thing that frankly people my age cannot remember, but you can read about, you can experience at some point in time, was the dot-com bubble, the dot-com boom, which was towards the later chapters, or maybe not later chapters, but the middle chapters of your story with free markets. Before we get to that chapter,
Pretty early.
I want to get to the the founding story and the catalyst of that company. You recognized an opportunity to see.
So what happened was, this gets into another core career principle. So I left. So I wanted to try out the Army. I got this great training. I learned all this great leadership stuff. We haven't even begun to, hey, here's a quick tip on leadership. Always eat last.
Yep.
There's a principle in the Army of, if you're a lieutenant in charge of a platoon and everybody's hungry, it's been a long day, you make sure all your troops, you stand in the back of the line, everybody eats first. That's what a leader does.
Yep.
And so you put your people ahead of you. And you do that in many, many ways. And if you do that, people will love you and they'll follow you, even in combat. But so I learned many things in the military, but I didn't want to make it a career. So it was great. I tried something. I threw myself in, decided, okay, great, learned a lot, but I'm not going to do that with my career. That's what people need to do. Then I did the same thing, Kraft General Foods. I worked in marketing. Wow, love business, like marketing, don't like that kind of company, don't like flat growth. Okay, I need to find something better. I'm at business school. I literally started asking around, where do people make money here? It was like investment banking or consulting. And I was like, well, I don't really want to be a banker. I don't want to just do transactions. I want to learn to build and run a business. Let me do consulting because I'll see a lot of businesses. So I go do that. And and I had a great entrepreneurial finance professor at Harvard Business School. His name is Bill Salmon. He's recently retired, but he's still alive and well and doing great. And Bill said a lot of key things, but Bill said, you're not going to, as an entrepreneur or what'd you call it? Wantrepreneur, you're not going to find an idea sitting on your couch watching television. I would say you're not going to find an idea, sitting on your phone, hanging out, playing video games either, right? You're going to find an idea being out there in the world. And so, at McKinsey, I ended up doing a lot of work in sourcing, which is helping companies buy stuff better, higher quality, lower cost, faster turnarounds, lower inventories, all that kind of stuff. And I found, my goodness, you could save a ton of money. And I could tell you stories, but I did a couple of different studies, big projects for different companies where we just made them money hand over fist by doing better sourcing, helping them find better suppliers, cheaper prices, et cetera. So, and I after 2.5 years at McKinsey, I was like, this is not at that point I was married, my wife, we had one baby, we had another one on the way. And I was like, this is not the lifestyle for me. So I decided to look around, and I wanted to start a business right then and there, but I didn't have it. It didn't all come together for me. And I got a great offer from General Electric, which at the time was a great company. I'm not sure if it is anymore, but it was a great company then, and actually worked on Jack Welch's staff.
Wow.
And so it was this internal consulting group, worked directly for Jack. So my boss reported directly to Jack, and we did work for Jack, and we did work around the company, different internal consulting projects, and there was nobody working on sourcing and supply management. And that's another key principle, right? Go where they ain't.
Yep.
And I knew from my experience with McKinsey, you could generate boatloads of money for a company by improving sourcing, and no one at GE wanted to none of the people, the 40 people in my internal consulting group wanted to focus on it. So I was like, I'm going to do that. So I start working on this, and it was 1994. And it was just when there was no browsers, there was no commercial internet. The internet was out there as a concept. And actually, the first time I ever think I really started to understand the internet was when I saw the old movie War Games. Except, that movie?
I
War
don't.
Games? You should go look this movie up. There's a movie called War Games, and it's a movie about it's a long story, but basically it's this. A computer runs amok, and there's almost a nuclear war because the computer is thinks it's doing a simulation, a war game, and it turns out that people don't know that, and so the other side's almost launching nuclear weapons.
Got it.
And it's a great, fun movie. I think I saw it in probably 82. So I think I became aware of the internet about 1982, 83.
That's pretty early.
Oh yeah, well I'm aware, but and then by 1994, I'm aware of the internet, but there's no commercial internet, there's no browsers. But I'm at GE, and I'm like, okay, guys and girls, we need to find a way to create better competition between these suppliers. And there was a bunch of different ways they were doing that. But one guy I talked to had this idea. He was like, why don't we do bidding across the internet? And I said, really? He said, yeah. And we could create, we could use client server software technology, and we could run, and GE had a VAN, so they had a value-added network to do electronic transactions, so to move money across their private network. And he's like, I think we could create software that we could create a server, and we could create some client software on PCs where we could run bids across the network. I said, great, let's try it. So we did it, and then within a few weeks of experimentation, because I'm thinking, when I heard this, I'm thinking, okay, bid gets transmitted from this supplier, bid gets transmitted from that supplier. We see the bids, compare them. But no, what we realized real quick was that, we could create interactive bidding in real time. And that was in June of 1994. I was like, wow, we can create. So a supplier sitting in North Carolina could be bidding against a supplier in India or a supplier in China.
Wow.
And, it's $1 million contract. The supplier in North Carolina could bid $1 million, and the supplier in China could see that bid and respond to it in near real time. I was like, that changed. So we could have global downward price electronic auctions. I was like, that's going to change the world.
Yeah.
That's going to change the world. That kind of real-time interactive across the globe, that's going to change the world. And so that was in June 1994. So I went to my boss and I said, listen, I got this idea for this GE electronic marketplace. Let me go do that. So I had another project I was still working on, but he said, yeah, go ahead and spend time on that. So basically from June of 94 through February of 95, I worked on what I call the GE electronic marketplace. And so it became a thing, and I became the manager of it. And it got off the ground, and we had some early success. We created some early software and had some early success. But we had some problems too. And also I realized, I learned that it wasn't just about the technology. In this case, garbage in, garbage out. If people didn't know what they were bidding on, the results were meaningless. So it was really important to specify exactly what is the contract? What are the quality requirements? What are the delivery requirements? What are the material requirements? It was really important to specify all that. What are the logistics? What are the payment requirements? Everything. And then, so everybody had apples to apples comparison, and to make sure that all the suppliers knew what those were, and also make sure all the suppliers were capable head to head. And so there was a lot of economic work and really engineering and manufacturing work that went with the internet technology. And I learned that. I also learned that trying to do something new within a big corporation was really hard.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, gee, I could put 2 or 3 or 4 years of my life into this, and they pat me on the head and say, great job, Glenn, here, we're going to give you a promotion, go run appliances.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to go run appliances. I want to be in the internet. So I left. So it was funny, my dad was alive at the time. My dad lived for many years after that, but he, here I was like 30, I was 29 years old, and I was 30. I was 30 years old, had a wife, I had a 6-month-old baby and a 30-month-old, so a 2.5-year-old and a 6-month-old, and a fabulous wife. And we're living in Connecticut. I'm working for GE. I'm making a ton of money for my age, and I left. And my dad thought I was just crazy.
What are you doing?
Well, the good news was when I put together a private placement, and I had saved $100,000. That's another key principle. If you're a wantrepreneur, and this guy Bill Salmon at Harvard told me this a long time ago. One of his key lessons was, you're not going to find a good idea sitting on a couch watching TV. Second key idea: if you really want to be an entrepreneur, you got to live like it. You got to save money and keep your expenses down. So we were doing that, fortunately, and the bottom line was, I went and we took the $100,000 we had saved, and we put it all into Forever. Excuse me, this was Free Markets. All into Free Markets, freemarkets.com, my first internet company. And then I recruited a partner, a guy named Sam Kinney, who I'd met at McKinsey. He put a chunk of money in, like, it was a little bit less, maybe 75,000. And then my dad put despite the fact that my dad thought I was crazy, and this is where I love him for this, was that he bet on me too. He put in two different, I think he put $100,000 in as well, which was a lot of money to him.
Yeah.
And then Sam's dad put $50,000 or $100,000 in. So that's how we got Free Markets.
That was your seed investment.
Capitalized was our own money. It was Sam's money, the two co-founders and our dad's put in the first, probably $300,000 combined. And then we did a private play. It was 1995. It's shocking when you see, I think the total amount of venture capital invested in the U.S. economy in 1995 was $5 or $6 billion, compared to, by 1999, about $100 billion. And today it's got to be $140, $150 billion.
Yeah.
And of course, it's all very, very late stage. It's funny, early stage, particularly in Pittsburgh, is sort of back to the future. It's like back to 1995, because there's so much money flowing into late stage. It's very difficult to do early stage, but it was very difficult to get early stage funding in 1995, even with a compelling internet idea. And so we did a private placement and raised our first, $1 million or $2 million that way. And we got going, and it was we just got going really, really hard, really fast, worked really hard in 1995, and had our first. I started, I left GE in February. We started Free Markets in March of 95, got it going. We got some software built. We had our first downward price real-time auction for a client. I believe it was late November of 95. So about, 9 months later or so. And we ended up having $16,000 of revenue that year in 1995. And then in 96, here's why Free Markets was so valuable. 96, we had $408,000 of revenue. Then 97, we had 1.8 million of revenue. Then 98, we had almost 8 million of revenue. 99, we had 23 million of revenue, went public. And we went public on December 9th, 1999, right before the end of the century, right in the heart of the internet bubble. And we had, the day we went, when we filed we did a Series C financing in September at a $750 million valuation.
Yeah.
Raised about $45 million in that. 3 months later, we went public, raised $200 million. And when we filed the S1, which is when you start the IPO process, we filed at about an $800 million valuation. Over the 2 weeks of the roadshow, the demand was unbelievable. We went from a $14 price in the S1. We went public at $48. Could have gone public higher, but I had a whole discussion with Mary Meeker telling us to go lower. But we had Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs co-book running. Went public at 48, which was a $2.5 billion valuation. That was where we went public the morning of the 9th of December. The final trade that day was at 270. So it was I think to this day, the fourth largest first day pop in an IPO. And we closed the day at about an $8 billion valuation.
It got as high as 10.
It got as high as 13. The stock went as high as $360 a share, $13 billion valuation. And that all happened in December. Basically, the highest valuation day was the last day of the century. So December 31st, 1999, we had a $13 billion valuation.
So I'm supposed to ask about that. One of the previous employees, the legendary holiday party of 1999 at Free Markets, was apparently a heck of a show.
It was much better than anything you ever saw on TV.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No more than
Except
that?
I had the flu.
Right on. So that experience, to me, what cannot ever be translated into someone in their career right now is being in a market of euphoria and the differing degrees of maybe Mary Meeker telling you to lower or cap that valuation. Right. But the recognition that there is something, one of the books I read when I was a student at the University of Pittsburgh talked about like the South Seas bubble and Tulip Mania and these other periods in time where this has occurred.
I wish I'd read that book in college or business school. I didn't.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about bubbles.
So was there a recognition or was okay.
No, it was, so you've seen The Grinch Who Stole Christmas.
Yes.
You've seen the in cartoon version.
Yes.
And I'm sure everybody has. Think about the Grinch's mountain. Okay, so the Grinch lives on this huge mountain. But this way up there. It's like this spire way up in the sky. You look down, you're looking down. It looks like the way the cartoon is, like tens of thousands of feet down on Whoville, and the Grinch lives up on this mountain. And somewhere, even though it's at this tippy top, there's a big cave up there, and he lives up there. Right? That's the Grinch.
Yeah.
And that is not a real mountain. That's not possible. That's like a Dr. Seuss mountain, right?
Right.
And it's not the Swiss Alps, the Rockies, the Himalayas. The Grinch's mountain is not physically possible. Okay, that was the internet bubble. When you look at the chart of the internet bubble in 1999, starting in fall of 1998 when eBay went public, September 98 is where it really started. But it went all the way and it peaked in March of 2000. But it started to get real bumpy. We were like at the summit in January, February of 2000, right after a month after our IPO. And then it crashed in March into April of 2000. But that peak, when you look at the chart, it's not. It's a Dr. Seuss peak. It's not a Himalayas. It's not the Alps. It's not the Rockies. It's a physically impossible peak. Now I say that I try to draw that picture, and literally, if you go and you look at the data, that's the shape of it's a Dr. Seuss peak. And yet here we are climbing, the first side of that, and we didn't all know.
Yeah.
We didn't know it was going to crash. I mean, it's unbelievable we didn't, but no one knew it was going to crash. That's the truth. No matter what anybody tells you now, no one knew it was going to crash.
All that, yeah.
We thought, we're changing the world. The internet's going to change everything. It's, we're getting valued because of the amount of change there's going to be. And when you look back, it's like, look at Google, look at Amazon, look at Facebook, look at Netflix. I mean, look at where Microsoft has gone. I mean, the internet has changed everything. It's just that it took, it's taken 20 years, and nobody knew what to use kind of Wall Street term. No one knew what names were going to be the ones that stuck, But so this doctor piece, we wrote up one side of it, and then we fell off the other side all the way back down to Whoville, and a lot of it, and I was the kind of loyal. I was never a Boy Scout, but I like the phrase. I'm kind of the loyal and true Boy Scout kind of person. And I didn't sell any. I was locked up. I didn't sell a single share during the bubble.
Yeah.
Not and so at one point I was worth 1.5 billion on paper. And then, then of course and I'm I think there were a lot of people in the internet bubble, in the first internet bubble like me who, didn't get anything out during it. There were some people who got really, really, really lucky.
Yeah.
And happened to built not nothing, but got to sell a lot of nothing at the peak. There were a few people like that. I won't mention any names, but there were a few people like that, but very few.
So I might not meet another person in a long time who I can ask the question this way of, psychologically what that does to you. Like that is the definition of a roller coaster, right?
Oh, it's not a roller coaster. A roller coaster is physically possible. This was like a Dr. Seuss mountain. This was not physically possible.
Yeah. So clearly it's apparent from so far in this interview that family is very important. You have your relationship with your wife and your kids and dad and all this stuff. But in terms of the conversations that happen as that's going on and trying to make sense of it,
one of the challenging things was one of the challenging things is, as a public company CEO, you're not allowed to talk to anybody. And, had I had the experience I have now, I would have done a better job of having kind of personal advisors who were sort of within the veil of silence who I could talk to. But this all happened, Aaron, this happened so fast. It was unbelievable. I mean, I can't even tell you. It just happened so fast. And so, and we're growing. So, and one of the things, the numbers are so amazing, right? So we finished the year 1999 with 23 million of revenue and a $13 billion market cap, right? Which is ridiculous, but that's what it was. Then in the year 2000, we grew the company over 300%. So in the year 2000, we did 99 million of revenue. It was actually, if you adjust for GAAP, Bubble, it was actually 90 million, but because we had a bad ruling on one contract. But our real revenue went from 23 to 99. or if you want to say gap, 23 to 90, whichever. But 300% plus growth. That's what was going on in our business. We went from like 286 employees to like 1,100 employees. So the business is booming, and the stock price is cratering. That's what happened to us in 2000, and that was so we started the year with a $360 per share price, and we ended the year with like $20 a share, and it was very. There were some people who had a real tough psychological time with that.
Yeah.
For me, it's interesting. I've written. I've given a speech on this. I've written. I've actually published. I'll give you a copy before you leave.
Yeah.
I've actually got one book done. It's and it's somewhat autobiographical, but it's really about forever. I've got another book in my head talking about this, but the day before, the day of the IPO on December 9th, the night before, after 2 weeks of roadshow, hadn't had a flu shot, shaking hands with hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of people all across the country, and I picked up the flu, and it hit me really hard the morning of the IPO.
Yeah.
So I actually wasn't even in the photo at the CNBC market site. I wasn't, I was at the I was back in the hotel, getting sick to my stomach. I was able to drag myself, out of the hotel by about 2 p.m. and meet my wife and kids and everybody else in the whole IPO party. And then we flew back on a G5 to Pittsburgh for the party you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I was able to kind of pull myself through. But the fact that I was sick that morning gave me a level of perspective. I had perspective anyway, maybe, but it was a really interesting thing that happened, because all of a sudden, the morning of the IPO, I felt so bad. It was one of when you're really, really sick with the flu and you're getting sick to your stomach and you're kind of worshiping the porcelain god. Yeah. You're not thinking about money. You're thinking about how bad you feel, right?
It puts in perspective. You trade it all to feel.
That's right.
Better.
So that was a godsend for me that I had that little bit of perspective at that moment, because it was an incredibly, it was just, how many people do you talk to who have been billionaires, right? And it's like when you talk to me, you're talking to somebody who made $1 billion and lost $1 billion.
Yeah.
And then and then do you have the courage and the will to fight on and be successful going forward? That's what it comes down to.
And it also seems like, to a degree, if you're expanding from 23 to 99 million in revenue, so on and so forth, that you're also in the eye of the storm, just having to continue to execute, like just to manage that growth, regardless of share price, just adding headcount and closing deals and all of that, and the inevitable things that break as you grow at that fast of a rate.
Trying to manage 300% growth and trying to manage the all the people stuff going on with that, and then some of the upset some of the people who are large investors are experiencing because the stock has crashed. Even though we're doing so well, the stock is going down. To explain that, and trying to manage all that, and then on top of that, and this is where, in retrospect, you do need to recognize that, one of the keys to, and Jim Collins in Good to Great writes about this, one of the keys to success of a company is when the leadership, and I mentioned Washington, when the leadership completely aligns itself with, not with their career and their money, but with the success of the organization, right? That's really key. And believe me, I was like living, breathing, drinking free markets. But you have to also, as an entrepreneur, recognize that your financial interest does vary, especially once you're public. But your financial interest is a little bit different from that of your company and your shareholders. For instance, it is in your interest to diversify and put some money on the side. And in fact, you're crazy not to.
Yeah.
But it's not like your lawyers or accountants and people inside the company are going to tell you that. You need good advisors because they're legally obligated not to tell you that.
Yeah.
In a way, right? You need some lawyers and accountants outside who are just advising you about your interests too. So that, I learned all that. I learned a little bit too late, but that's okay. We did, I've learned a lot that's benefited me a lot since. And of course, with free markets, what happened is that we had this incredible IPO and incredible market cap for 3 months, and really for that whole year, because we crashed from the $13 billion level down to $2.5 billion. And that was still on a company with only, 99 or $100 million of revenue.
A ridiculous
25
multiple.
times revenue multiple, right? It was still huge. And then it was at the end of the year, because it was the second internet crash in November 2000, when we went from like that $2.5 billion level down to like the $500 million level. And that was much more rational. and then which would be much more consistent with today's valuations. And then we kept growing the company. We grew the company to close to 200 million. And then our growth rate slowed down dramatically, and we eventually sold the company merged into Ariba in 2004. We did that. The valuation of our company at that point was 500 million, and then Ariba, the combined companies did very well. In fact, here in Pittsburgh, Ariba sold in 2012 to SAP for about $2.5 billion. So the merger of the two companies worked very, very well. And then and SAP, people don't realize it, but SAP has built this big office building right next to the right next to PNC Park on the North Shore, and it's filled. There's a whole bunch of people who used to work for FreeMarkets who are still working for SAP.
Yeah. A couple of those characters also dispersed and have started companies, and we've had a few of them on past episodes of the podcast. But what you did as a next step after that acquisition was start venture investing, and you had a couple different successes: Kiva Systems, Shipwire, CloudMeter, HotPads. And I'm curious if, I want to be respectful of your time here. We've been rolling pretty fast, but in terms of as another kind of period of your career, to people my age, particularly in that not sure which way to go, the same way people latch on to investment banking or consulting as a pathway to go down, venture investing, venture capital has that same type of aura to the kind of entrepreneur stage character. So having, acquired some wealth still from the acquisition and everything that happened.
And part of we ended up selling the company for $500 million. So I ended up doing very, very well.
Yes.
But not, but it was interesting because I had this look at a whole different level, and that didn't last, but it also helped keep things in perspective for me. And you're right. You asked before, how did I survive all that psychologically? It was hard, but it gets back to, I had been to war, and I got shot at, and you learn what is really important. The most important things are your family, your spouse, your children, your parents. If you have faith in God, these are the things that are important to you. Loyalty to your friends and family. And I think the people who are very, very, very wealthy but don't have that, I wouldn't trade. You need to have what's really valuable in your life. It's those people and your faith and beliefs. That's what really gives life meaning. So fortunately, I was aware of that, and that really saw me through that whole experience. And then we kept, and I'm like a bulldog. I get my teeth into something. I'm determined. So we kept working away. My co-founder Sam Kinney left shortly after the IPO, but Dave Becker, who had joined us a couple years after we started the company, he was a friend of mine from Harvard Business School. He was our COO for a number of years. He was fabulous. And a guy named Dave McCormick, who's had an amazingly successful career since FreeMarkets. He joined us 2 days before the IPO and was a really key leader for 4 years, leading up to our sale to Ariba. And then he actually succeeded me as CEO 6 months before we sold to Ariba, and then I left right away. He stayed for a year after the sale to Ariba. So we had some, Dave McCormick and Dave Becker are the first two that come to mind, but we had a whole bunch of other people who were really, really critical in getting us there. And I will say too, here in town, Marley Myers at Morgan Lewis was our attorney throughout, and she was a terrific advisor to the company. And so there were a lot of great people, and we were able to just stick to our guns, and we built the thing. When we went public, we were only 23 million in revenue. 3 years later, we were almost 200 million. And then strategically, and so we'd really grown we never had $1 billion valuation again, but we had really grown into that, $500 million valuation.
Yeah. It wasn't vaporware.
Oh, heck no. We had at our peak year, we had $50 million in positive cash flow. We were, FreeMarkets was a real company. Yeah. And that's why that's why SAP has this big office in Pittsburgh, and there's still hundreds of people who work there, because what we built was real. And we all did very well. We didn't do Bubble well, but we did very, very well. And then it's funny, and during that last year or two at FreeMarkets, I started getting, I would get deal flow. People would come to me with ideas and with deals. And one of them was actually Niche.com, Luke Skirman's company, which is doing extremely well. And of course, I was the lead investor in Niche going way back to when it was College Prowler. The old
he was fresh out of his dorm.
Yeah, he was when I met him. And and then I've been chairman of the board ever since. So that's been, niche has been, kind of one of my sidelight entrepreneurial advising missions here. But because of that, and I did some other kind of super angel investing after selling, after I got out of free markets. And then that led to Dave Becker and I. Dave left, I left free markets. Dave left free markets, after the sale. And we got together again and put together a venture fund, $75 million venture fund. And we raised that money, from institutions and people and all kinds of people we knew. And we were able to put together a pretty big first time fund doing early stage investing. And we spent from 06 to 12, that 6-year period, doing early stage tech investing. And we made 16 investments, and we've had 5 different successful liquidity events from that. The fund is almost completely, it's been a success, almost completely wrapped up.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from that. But, and there's a lot of repeat messages here. The team is so critical. If you have an entrepreneur who's really talented, smart, dedicated, but honest, and trying to really care about their constituents, they're really trying to do a great job for clients, but really respects his or her shareholders. That's key. And every great experience we've had where we made money was with a great founder and CEO. Some of the times where we weren't successful in our venture investing, and of course every venture fund has those failures, were cases where we thought the person or the people were great and they turned out not to be so great. And like one of the big things I focus on, do these people really respect their investors, and do they respect the capital? And are they intending to actually make people money, or is it just a game?
Yeah.
And I don't want to invest in anybody who's not taking it seriously.
Right.
So, and unfortunately there are people who talk a good game and then they're not taking it that seriously, or it's just really hard. It can be very, very hard to get a business off the ground. So.
And so basically after deploying that route, like sometimes, if you had the successful different acquisitions of some of those investments, that's part of the basis by which someone then builds a story and, goes back to the LPs and maybe raises fund 2, fund 3, fund 4. You kind of decided that just wasn't the avenue that you felt fulfillment?
Yeah, I did not. The problem, venture capital is a lot like high school.
Okay, I don't think I've heard that one before.
Yeah, and I'll give you a lot of original. The Dr. Seuss Peak, that's me too.
Yeah.
But venture capital is a lot like high school, and all the really cool kids live in California, and the somewhat cool kids, but they've gotten a lot cooler. But the pretty darn cool kids live in New York.
Yeah.
And the wannabe cool kids who aren't really that cool live in Boston. That's a problem. Boston's a clear number 3, but and Pittsburgh's just not that cool.
Yeah.
In the venture capital world, you're in Pittsburgh and you just kind of have a little bit of a mark on you that you're just not, if you were any good, you'd be in California or you'd be in New York at least. But why are you in Pittsburgh? And that's true. It's a very catty, high schooly world.
Yeah.
Among venture capitalists and people who are sort of close to that. And so, and it's funny because clients and customers don't care where you are. I think 2/3 of high school students are signed up with niche.com every year. It's amazing the penetration they have of high school students, right? No one knows where niche.com is located.
Right.
And it's located here in Pittsburgh, and it's Luke Skurman is fabulous, and his team is terrific, and you can be, and Free Markets proves it, niche.com proves it, Forever proves it, other companies, giftcards.com proves it. You can be located here. Nobody cares where that company is. But somehow in the venture capital world, having the right return address for the venture firm itself is important. And so that was one thing I was frustrated because at this point, I've got 5 kids, that 4 of them are grown and out of that, 2 are in college, 2 are in their 20s. But the bottom line is we're settled here. I'm not from here. I'm from New York, but we're settled here in Pittsburgh. We're staying here, and this is where we have roots. So this is where we're staying, and so that was one thing. I was like, okay, I can't really build a world-class venture firm here. I can't do it. It's because all the cool kids are in California and New York. That was one thing. But even more important than that, I'm an operator. I'm a leader.
Yeah.
And I just found that, being a venture capital investor, I was just too much in the back seat. It just wasn't fulfilling for me. And And then I had this, and it's a very long-term thing. I mean, here with Meakem Becker, here we've had a successful fund. We started in '06.
Yeah.
We probably started working on it late in '05. The investment period was 5.5 years, from mid '06 to the end of '12, and then we've been in the harvest period here, and now it's 2020, and we're just successfully completing we're going to legally complete the fund and have our final communications to LPs and stuff here in 2020. We just sent big check. We had a big liquidity event. A company called Schoology.com sold here in December, or it sold in November. We distributed all the money in December to our LPs, and here it is. It's 2020. I mean, I started that in 2005.
Wow.
And that's another thing too, that's another frustration I have with the venture capital industry, is that all the people you deal with, you go to raise money, all the people you deal with are not the people like me who raise the money, who are accountable to the shareholders, who are really following through. It's all these people who are, I was at this firm for 3 years, and I was at that firm for 2 years, and I was at that firm for 5 years. They don't really have skin in the game. And so they don't act like it as investors either, but that's another story. The bottom line for me though is that we just decided that, or I decided in 12 at the end of the investment period, that I just didn't enjoy investing in other people that much, and I really enjoyed running my own show. And I had this great idea. Then it gets into, we started the interview with Forever.com, and I was like, at this point, I've got 5 kids, wife, been married 25 years or whatever it was, and I think maybe we had 2 in college at the time, or 1 graduating, but we had, we're at a very active stage with our family, and it's like, where am I going to keep all these memories? Where am I going to keep all this stuff? And that's why I said, well, there's no permanent place on the internet. There's no place where I can have a private, permanent cloud that I can trust. And there was a bigger thought too, which is that, we live in this society now where, my goodness, I mean, the political fighting is so intense. Nobody trusts anybody. Nobody trusts the government anymore. I mean, frankly, the IRS has been used against people. I'm a war veteran, right? Like I said, I was shot at, but I don't quite have the same attitude towards our government that I used to have. I mean, I'm very loyal. I'm a very loyal person, but I have a level of skepticism that I just didn't used to have, because I've seen people in Washington, D.C. Again, I'm not being political, but I've seen people in Washington, D.C. use the government apparatus against citizens in a way I just don't approve of. So I will never. I mean, I used to send I used to write. I paid a tremendous amount in taxes.
Sure.
Tremendous. And I used to pay my taxes with the same sort of patriotic feeling that I served in the military. Like, this is my duty to the country. And now I sort of pay my taxes because I have to. And, there's a good, right? But it's like I have to. And I just, there have been things that have happened in the last, 10, 15 years, whatever, that I can't really ever forgive. I mean, the fact that politicians at high levels use the IRS against taxpayers, against certain kinds of taxpayers for their politics, is so outside the bounds of what America is about, that I'll never think of our federal government or the IRS the same way again. So, that's just a fact.
I'm going to latch on to something, which is the notion that you go to a college and they have a startup competition, and everything is about hooking up or finding the party or getting the booze at an appropriate price, because that's the world that the college student is in, and they're making something for themselves. And then you look at some of these Silicon Valley startups, and it's the, recently into adulthood, hey, we'll help you walk your dog, get your laundry, buy your groceries, so on and so forth. And you, reaching this point in your life, seeing the significance and the importance of family, make something for which, once again, you are the target demo to some degree. Mothers, fathers, parents, looking to keep track of those memories. And you were talking about very early in this interview about how or what it's like to go about uncovering an opportunity or a market or a potential startup idea. And I think that that's another important idea, which is not trying to go way out into Timbuktu to go fix the problem over there that you probably don't really understand, but to recognize the problem right at home and go about addressing it.
I completely agree. And I mentioned one of my mentors, and I have been blessed with many. I had a great father. He wasn't perfect. He had his ups and downs, but I learned a lot from him. And a great mother. I just saw her this weekend. So I'm very, very blessed by that. And I have a great wife, and I have great kids. What time is it now? I got a call scheduled with my daughter.
3:45.
Okay, I'm good. But and I have great kids. So I have great people in my life. But I've also had great mentors. And I mentioned this guy, Bill Salmon, who I need to give a call to. And he was one of my professors at Harvard Business School I'm still in touch with. And he was actually an investor in Meakem Venture Capital. That's one reason I need to give him a call.
Yeah.
But I need to make sure he gets his check. But he always said that. It's going back to this concept of you're not going to find that entrepreneurial idea looking at from Pittsburgh, looking at Timbuktu, or sitting on your couch looking at the TV. You're going to find that through your own experience, being out there in the world. And that's, with tech, not like with free markets, the whole, I was aware of the internet, but I discovered the need that industrial companies had for sourcing, and also the need of the capabilities of the internet through my work experience, myself directly. So I knew about those two things, and then I was able to put them together. I'm very scientific. I'm very curious about science. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an inventor. What I am, though, is I'm a conceptual. I understand. I mentioned about how things are all connected together. Everything's connected. Everything influences everything else. The system is it's incredibly complex. You could never possibly model the economy and how everything interacts, but everything's connected. And sometimes great entrepreneurs, or at least capable ones like me, are people who see connections across things and can put things together. So I put industrial sourcing and the internet together. That was a big insight in 1994, 95, right? With Forever, I was old enough. I'm very internet aware and stuff, but I was old enough to see that, wow, people need permanence.
Yeah.
It was an idea that was at home for me, just like you're saying. But here's the other thing. So we start the thing, and we're thinking, oh yeah, we're going to sell to men, we're going to sell to women. We hired a guy who's a fabulous guy. He's a friend of mine. We were supposed to have dinner a couple weeks ago, and he got sick, but a guy who's older than me. But we hired this guy to just focus on selling to veterans, because we thought, veterans would be a great market for this, right? And you go figure that out. Well, it turned out it's all about women. So you're right. You got to start something in an area where you know something about, but then you have to listen to your clients. You have to listen, and you have to make changes. So I found with both free markets and with Forever and with a lot of the other companies I've been involved in, Niche.com is another great example where you start doing one thing, you go through the door, and my co-founder at Free Markets, Sam Kinney, used to have this analogy of, you're there, you're a entrepreneur. I love that phrase. I'm going to use that. It's your phrase, but I never heard it before today. But you see that door there of going through that door and starting a venture, but you can't see through the door. You got to go through it. You literally cannot see what's on the other side till you actually walk through it. And once you walk through it, you really can't go back. From a career standpoint, if you have a good education and stuff, you could, but from where you are today, you're not going to be able to go back to where you are today. You're going to walk through that door, and you're going to move forward in your life. But once you walk through that door and you're in business, new opportunities open up. If you're aware, if you're paying attention, if you're listening to clients and customers. And so in our case with free markets, the quick example is we really thought we could get suppliers to pay for the service. And we worked like heck for like 2.5 years trying to have suppliers pay us a sales commission for winning businesses through freemarkets.com. And it didn't work. We made some millions of revenue, but it was so hard. We flipped, then we listened to and we had one big client. This is a great story. We had P&G, Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati, Ohio, was a pilot client. And we did some work for them. We ran some downward price auctions for them. We saved them a lot of money on 2 or 3 different projects. And they said, they paid us some money for it. And they said, okay, free markets, we like you guys, great. We want to do a bigger contract, but there's only one problem. This whole supplier sales commission thing, that's not going to work for us. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do it. We'll pay you some money, and let's talk about how much money we'll pay you, but we're not going to do that. We said, oh no, Procter & Gamble, we're free markets, and we the way we do business is we get paid a little bit of money by the buyer, but we get paid the sales commission by the supplier. They're like, listen, our suppliers we're not going to have our suppliers pay you money. We'll pay you money, but we're not going to do that. And we said, well, I'm sorry, that's and we said, here's the way we do it. Here's a proposed contract, blah 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 blah. And then guess what happened? The phone didn't ring. They never called us back. And because we didn't listen to the client.
Yeah.
And then, then we said, maybe and here in the meantime, I'm thinking it is so hard to sell this, and I'm not going into all the details because the buyers were resistant and the suppliers were resistant, and we're trying to force ourselves in the middle, and so long story short, 9 months later, General Motors came along, and we did a pilot project for them, and they said, great. And they said, hey, we want to do a bigger contract with you. And we said, great. And they said, but yeah, this supplier sales commission thing's not going to work. And we said, that's okay. Let's talk about how much money you'll pay us. We flipped the whole model. This is in like 1997. Remember that whole story? We started in 95, went public in 98, or 99 rather. 98, 99 were the years where we really took off. This was in 1997. And yeah, we had like $1.8 million of revenue in 1997. 98, we had $8 million. 99, we had $23 million, right? Those numbers, that's really, really hard. Well, guess what? In 1997, we flipped the model. And we decided, okay, let's let the buyers want to pay us. And we're creating a lot of value for them. Let's charge them for it. And boom, that was one thing that let the company take off because we listened to our client. Now, that was sort of a second or third order thing. We never would have even understood that was an issue. Gee, the idea that buyers are going to fight us, suppliers are going to fight us in creating this new e-marketplace, we never would have even learned all that had we not started the business, right? Yeah. And then the idea that, that big buyers wanted to control, wanted to pay, and they didn't want to, force, whatever. We wouldn't have learned all that stuff. So we learned and we listened. We didn't listen fast enough. We never got, there's a story in Pittsburgh locally that Heinz Ketchup had a big fight with McDonald's like 30 years ago. And except for Pittsburgh, Heinz never had a McDonald's contract. I think McDonald's felt like, okay, in the local Pittsburgh market because of Heinz, and Heinz is less important now than it was 10 years ago because they've sold. But, local, franchises of McDonald's here carried Heinz ketchup. Anywhere else in the world, no Heinz ketchup because McDonald's held a grudge because of whatever happened 30 or 40 years ago, right? Procter & Gamble, all these years later, the free markets years, the Reba years, they never got Procter & Gamble back as a client. Never, right? And that's a great learning.
That's a powerful lesson.
Powerful lesson. So with Forever, we start Forever, and I've got this guy, full-time guy focused on veterans, and we're trying different markets. We're doing advertising here or there, and we learned real quick. Because we were listening, we learned real quick. Our market was, it's not middle-aged men. Yeah, there's a few family guys who do genealogy and care, but the market was moms and grandmas who care about the family memories and who keep the photos and do the photo books and it's the moms, the women are the memory keepers in the family, and that's who we sell to. We don't. If you look at forever.com, if you go to our website, we're not anti. It's not like all pink or anything. It's not. We don't exclude men.
There's a way to brand something subtly in the direction that
right.
is going to be the most fertile
right.
ground.
We try to be very, very focused on the moms while still being inclusive of the dads. But let's face it, our business is like 95% mom and grandma too. And that's the other thing too is there's the baby boom. Yeah, there people are like okay boomer and stuff and all that. But hey, the baby boom is a huge market still. I am the So I'm like the pivotal year between baby boom and Gen X. I'm not really a boomer psychographically. The people born in 62, 63, 64 are technically baby boom from a demographic standpoint because there was still a lot of births in those years. But we're different than the people born in the before that in this 60, 61, 50s, and late 40s. We're just different.
Yeah.
We're post 60s revolution. We're post Vietnam. We're we're just different. And then so we're more like Gen X. But bottom line is from a demographic standpoint, the big bubble, the big boom years were 46 to 64. I was born in 64. The oldest boomers right now are 73, 74. And in today's world, that's pretty young. So there's this huge group of
still
people
going to have buying power.
Yeah, this huge group of people between 56 and 74 who are pretty tech. The people who are older than the baby boom, they're much less technological than the baby boom people. Like the older people didn't really like the World War II and before, they haven't really adopted the technology, but the baby boom generation has adopted the technology, and they have huge buying power, and they're the memory, and they're so we have a lot of clients for Forever.com in that age group. So a lot of grandmas, and then a lot of moms. And we're working really hard to be appealing. We're not really worrying about teenagers and young 20-somethings, but once that woman has a baby, we want her to be a forever client. So that's what we do with forever.com.
You've been so gracious with so much of your time, Glenn. I really appreciate you sharing all these stories with us. I want to, you've plugged forever.com plenty of times, but any other digital coordinates that you want to make sure people check out while we have their ear here before we sign off?
I'll make a quick point. This is one thing we're going to focus on with Forever, and one reason. And I apologize that I didn't get together with you and do this sooner. I meant to, and we just somehow last year went by and we never made it happen. But I appreciate your having patience with me and
of course
doing this anyway.
I'm down to run it back too if you want to sometime down the road.
Well, good. And I'll tell you one thing I learned with Free Markets, and we did very well because we did a lot of PR. And one thing I learned is that if someone is gracious enough to want to cover, my company or me, I'm going to be generous with my time. Don't be, here's one bit of advice and this is true dealing with investors and dealing with VCs and dealing with clients, and I could use more harsh language, but I will not on the recording. But don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
Be good to people. Be nice. It's like, hey, you want to be successful as an entrepreneur? Be nice. There are exceptions. Okay, Steve Jobs wasn't so nice. I think Gates has always been a pretty nice guy. I mean, okay, yeah. Hey, leaders sometimes have to make tough calls. You have to fire people. You have to give feedback when things aren't. There's stories about every successful business leader that they were tough in a meeting or something. But I think that a lot of successful entrepreneurs are actually very civil with people. And I think if you're going to try to be successful, it's good to make people like you, and that comes from just being nice to people. Don't be a jerk. So my approach to PR has always been, when dealing with anybody in the press at all, no matter how big or small, is to be gracious and nice. And it's worked out very, very well. It worked out very well for us at Free Markets. It takes energy and investment, but it's the right thing to do. In terms of
where to check you guys out, digital coordinates forever.com. Obviously, We're going to link in the show notes. Anything else you want us to link or point people towards?
No, forever.com is the place to go.
Perfect. That'll be linked in the show notes. You can find it in the app. We're probably listening to it right now. Or if you head on over to goingdeepwithaaron.com/podcast, you'll find the show notes for this.
Wait, say that slower.
goingdeepwithaaron.com/podcast.
Thank you.
You'll find it.
goingdeepwithaaron.com.
You'll find it for this and every single episode of the show. We're also going to link some other great interviews that we've done in the past, like Luke Skirman from niche.com and some other characters from Pittsburgh's entrepreneurial ecosystem. But before we let you go, Glenn, I want to give you the mic one final time and give you the opportunity to issue an actionable personal challenge for the listeners.
An actionable personal challenge for the listeners. I would say I would tie it to what we've said all along, which is if you are an entrepreneur, go out there. Or just a person I don't care whether you're in your mid-career or you're early in your career. The answer to the what do I do next question isn't that you're going to have all the answers. Whatever the door is, you got to walk through it. You got to go do something. Don't just sit back and question. Go throw yourself into something. And if you figure out that, if you throw yourself into a new business and a year or two later figure out it's just not the right business, it's okay. You learned something.
Yeah.
Right. And you can tell other people about what you learned. And maybe you get the credibility now to do better in something else. I mean, there's a lot of successful entrepreneurs who were not successful the first time.
Yep.
So it's true entrepreneurially, right? You have a great idea. Okay. Don't question, take action, throw yourself in, do something and learn from it. Same thing with a career. If you're 22 and you're trying to figure out what to do, nobody knows what they're going to do. The right thing is throw yourself into something. And if you, like me, you threw myself into the military. Okay. I learned a lot from it, but I didn't want to do it as a career. Okay, great. I learned I didn't want to do that, but I learned. And then, marketing at Kraft General Foods. Okay, I learned a lot from it. I knew it wasn't the right, that big a company, that slow a company. It wasn't the right thing for me, but I learned a lot from it. And by throwing myself in, the same thing with McKinsey when I was a consultant, by throwing myself into those things, I learned things and that eventually showed me my path. And it doesn't end. You just have to keep, what was I going to do after I sold Free Markets? Well, I didn't know, but I just kept trying stuff. you know, and I didn't know that forever was going to be on my horizon.
Yeah.
You know, I just kept.
There's no
you know,
playbook. It's just like after graduation, you were saying there's maybe a regimented system for the doctor, maybe somewhat for the lawyer. There also isn't a playbook for, okay, you built a technology company and sold it for a handsome amount of wealth and profit. What do you do now? There isn't a playbook for that either.
There's no playbook, but there are principles.
Yeah.
You know, and you can know what's important in life. You know, you can know that, oh, you better treat your family well, better prioritize them, I'd better do the right thing. I'd rather, you know, your reputation is really valuable. And if you are on it, and I look at the people we invested in the 5 CEOs who were really successful for us with Meakem Becker are all extremely, and different backgrounds, different parts of the country, but all extremely hardworking, extremely smart, and extremely high integrity, and all, frankly, nice people too. People like I enjoy talking to.
Yeah.
And one reason I'm not a VC anymore is then you got to deal with all the other people. and it's like, you know, so I would just encourage people to go try something, but then keep in mind what's important and be ethical and be kind.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I can say that I've absolutely loved talking with you, Glen. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, we just went deep with Glen Meakem. Hope everyone out there has a fantastic day. Thank you for watching to the end of my interview with Glen. He had so many leadership, entrepreneurial principles that he laid out in this interview. Let me know in the comment below your biggest takeaway from Glen's advice.